There's a book that you must read, even though you know the ending. TC agrees with me. We have both read the book. I should begin by saying no journalist knows the Alex Murdaugh case like Valerie Bauerlein, who has often been my guest in the past. She's covered the case of the disgraced South Carolina trial lawyer convicted of murdering his wife and son. She's been there from the get-go and has just published The Devil at His Elbow, Alex Murdaugh and the Fall of a Southern Dynasty. Today is the release day. She was in the courtroom for every major moment of the saga, from his initial bond hearing to the hearing on his request for a new trial after his conviction. She visited all of the locations pertinent to the underlying facts of this case and accompanied the jury to Moselle, the family hunting farm and scene of the murders that led to Alex Murdaugh's conviction. Even though you know the ending, you're going to hang on every page of the book. Valerie Bauerlein is a national reporter for the Wall Street Journal. Congratulations. I read it. I loved it, which sounds odd because of the underlying facts being a double murder. TC, my partner in crime, also read it because we had two review copies and we both came in saying extraordinary. The book is unbelievable.
Absolutely extraordinary.
And
every word.
Valerie, we would not say it if we didn't really believe it. I mean, you've been a guest here before. I didn't know how you were going to do it because I feel like I thought I knew everything, but the way that you wrote it beautifully and wove together all the detail, it's just extraordinarily well done. I have only one note that I will take up with you, but I'll save that for a couple of minutes' time. Let's begin at Moselle, because I remember seeing the footage of the jurors. There was a site visit, a crime scene visit that the defense wanted. I'm not sure it was in their best interest ultimately, but you accompanied them. Why were you there, and what surprised you about Moselle?
You know, and thank you for having me. Thanks for all those kind words about the book. What surprised me about Moselle is first, like, how vast it is. It's 1,700 acres. I'm here in New York, and Central Park is just a few blocks that way. Moselle is twice the size of Central Park, so it's enormous. And a lot of it is swampland and pine. But what surprised me is when you get to Moselle, how close everything is together. The house is 300 yards or so from the kennels where Maggie and Paul Murdaugh were killed. And the kennels are right on top of each other. Maggie and Paul, what shocked me was when I walked the property as the pool reporter, the print reporter representing the media, I went and stood where Maggie stood, and she was 12 steps, just 12 short steps away from Paul, where he fell in the feed room. So it just the close quarters of where everything happened, it just reinforced how intimate a crime it was.
And amazing to think, I mean, there were really two. I'm forever telling my audience that surprises in the midst of trial are only the stuff of television. And yet in this case, in the 11th hour, two significant things happened. One, the video, as I put it, the dog video, finally came from that unlocked phone of Paul's. Why they didn't use the birth date ahead of time, I don't understand. And also the General Motors revelation. Will you speak to both of those issues?
Sure. And when you said there were, two surprises, I was like, were there only two? I mean, there
two biggies
in my notebook. I have 30 notebooks from the trial, and I was flipping through one the other day, and in the margin it said, "Is this really happening?" I mean, it was just every moment was almost stranger than fiction. But the two things you're talking about, the dog video, was the video on Paul's phone that proved that Alec had been lying for well over a year about not being down at the kennels. And your listeners will remember it. Maggie says, the dog's got a bird in his mouth. It's a guinea. And Paul says it's a chicken. And you clearly hear Alec's voice calling Bubba the dog. So when that piece of evidence wasn't discovered for, I want to say, 9 months after the homicides, it was on Paul's phone, but Paul was very secretive. He didn't sync his phone to the iCloud. Alec didn't know the code, but his brother Buster didn't know the code. So it was only when they, finally were giving it over to the Secret Service to try to crack the phone. They said, well, give us, what's the address at Moselle? Okay, 4147. And when is Paul's birthday? In April. And they typed in those notes and it opened right up. Forged code.
And with regard to General Motors, there was the movement of the Suburban. The Suburban had a black box. They had tried unsuccessfully to try and unlock the car movements via the black box. And as I learned from you in the book, and this is one of those things that you just brought home for me, even though I'd paid close attention to the trial, someone at General Motors, you don't reveal exactly who that was. Maybe you don't know who that was, but someone like the rest of us was watching that trial on television and via the testimony heard that they had struggled to unlock the black box. And then within 48 hours, they send a missive to the prosecution and the defense and they say, here's all the data.
Massive trove of data points where, it gives me chills to remember it just second by second where he was the night of June 7th of 2021. And when that Suburban even went into park and when it went into drive and at what speed he hooked it over to his mother's house at Alameda, in the 80 plus miles an hour. So, yeah, I think we have to remember this trial was really a cultural moment. It was more streamed than any trial to date for court TV, twice the numbers as Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. It was the biggest trial really since OJ. And everyone on some level was sort of tuned in, including this person at GM who the prosecution had sent a request, hey, send us the black box data. And they're like, well, it was a new Suburban. We can't crack that box yet. Time passes, the trial starts. They're like, oh yeah, sure, we have it. And they sent it and it was this 11th hour surprise, like so many others in that trial.
Do you think that Alex Murdaugh would have been convicted but for the black box and the video?
The video for certain, and I think the prosecution would actually not have been able to charge Alec without the video, and my sources confirm that. And the jurors I talked to several jurors, and the jurors said, but for that video, we wouldn't have been able to say for sure that he was there. And it really put the defense in a pickle. Dick Harpootlian, Alec's lead lawyer, originally they had the question of the big why, the motive. Why would a man kill his wife and son on a quiet summer night at Moselle? The big why. And they went from the big why to the big lie. And they had to explain away why Alec lied about where he was the most important night of his life for more than a year.
Valerie Bauerlein's brand new book is titled The Devil at His Elbow. Of all the chapters in the book, I think the one that tells me what I most need to know about Alex Murdaugh, but Alex Murdaugh known to most, and the whole family dynamic and the history in that county is chapter 13 and the night of the morning after the Mallory Beach accident, which takes her life, and the way in which Alex and his father at 3 a.m. immediately go into battle mode, show up at the hospital as best they can, take control of that situation, had to drive like 50 miles to get there, beat the other families. Tell everybody who's not yet read the book, what am I talking about and what's the significance of chapter 13?
Well, I'm honored that you picked that chapter. That is the centerpiece of the book. It is the linchpin of the entire book. It's right dead in the middle of the book, and it's actually the first chapter I wrote.
Interesting. Wow.
I knew the boat wreck was going to be critical. The February 24th, 2019 boat wreck that killed Mallory Beach. Paul Murdaugh, who was 19 at the time, Alec's younger son, was very drunk. And we have records that show his blood alcohol level was 0.286, 3 times the legal limit. He had 19 drinks that night. And so there's a terrible boat accident. There's 6 young people on the boat, 3 go into the water and 1 doesn't come out. And that's Mallory Beach, who was also 19. And the scene in the emergency room, I think people are familiar with the boat wreck. Many of us watched the Netflix documentary that really dove into that. But what you might not know is the most perfect distillation of the way the Murdaugh family worked their power, this generational power, was making problems go away and making a lie look like the truth. And in that, you can go minute by minute in the ER as Alec walks from room to room. I had the benefit of some security camera footage to follow. I had no dialogue is invented in the book. We had the affidavits from the young people about what they said. And I had the advantage of a lot of non-public documents and exhibits and video to use. So it's a really important window for me to show the reader, this is how they worked. Alec Murdaugh and his father got to the ER before anybody. Alec testified that he had blue lights and siren on his Suburban. It stands to reason. You can look at his cell phone records and realize he was going 80 miles an hour in a 35-degree zone. They got there first because they needed to make those kids all get on the same page. And they also needed just to make this problem go away.
And the objective, there were several objectives, but one of the objectives was to cast doubt on Paul as the driver.
Correct. It wasn't important that they say for sure who was driving, just that there would be enough confusion sowed that you couldn't say for sure that it was Paul. And Paul's very close friend from childhood, Connor Cook, was also at the back of the boat at the time of the wreck. And Alec had coached Connor in Little League, and Alec had been on the star quarterback on the football team with Connor's dad as his teammate, very close friend. And you'll come to find out in the book, the Murdaughs had done a number of favors for the Cook family over the years, helping big problems go away in their lives. And so they owed them. And Alec was calling in a favor trying to call in a favor that night with the Cook family to make Connor potentially look like the driver, even though he swears he was not.
By the way, Valerie, I don't know if you can see my copy, but it's all notated. It's all written up. I've drawn. Thank God you gave me a review copy, because there was so much that I wanted to say, and I could only say it in the margins of the book. Here's something that I circled relative to the follow-up then to Mallory Beach's death. Somewhere in the fever dream that day, a black F-150 truck cruised up the causeway past the clusters of waiting families. Renee had no trouble identifying the two people inside. Randolph Murdaugh III was driving. Maggie Murdaugh was in the passenger seat. They did not stop to speak with any of the parents. They just stared straight ahead as they pulled up to the yellow tape. The old man rolled down the window and nodded. The officer lifted the tape and waved them through. What's going on in that scene?
Oh, that's that gives me chills to remember it, because Renee Beach is Mallory's mother, and she'd been standing on the causeway since 7 a.m. No law enforcement called her to tell her that her daughter was missing. She heard it from a family friend who happened to hear a rumor about it.
Right. Alex or Alec never called that night, notifying other families, but in the ER, they weren't going to disturb the Beaches.
Oh, we'll let them sleep. We don't want to worry them, and let them sleep. And so Renee Beach, Mallory's mother, has been standing there in agony for hours. And that same officer had offered her a bottle of water. He's like, ma'am, you cannot go down to the Archer's Creek where the wreck happened. It's a crime scene. You can't go down there. But here's a case of water for you and your family as you wait. And so then hours later, this truck belonging to Randolph Murdaugh III, Alec's father, he waves his arm and the yellow tape goes away, and they drive straight down to the crime scene. And that's significant because Randolph Murdaugh III was the prosecutor in that area. He was the lead prosecutor from 1986 to 2006, but he was in the prosecution's office since the 60s. He was the law. He still worked in the prosecutor's office. So he was the lead lawman on the scene in a way, and was just waved through. And Renee said, she told me, she's like, that's when I realized this was not, I thought I was at a vigil for my daughter, but this was a crime scene and they were trying to make it go away. And that's when she realized she needed a lawyer. And that's another critical moment in the book, because to take on the Murdaugh family was difficult. She had a hard time finding a lawyer. She finally found one, and his name is Mark Tinsley, and he was a key turn in the way things went.
And something not lost on me as an attorney was your explanation of the connection between the Gloria Satterfield death and the Mallory Beach death in this way. Satterfield, who falls down a flight of stairs, apparently, maybe tripped over the family dog, I don't know. But the housekeeper, the nanny, she played a lot of different roles for the Murdaugh family. She's dead on their property at Moselle. And Alex Murdaugh now suggests to her kids, hey, I'm going to hook you up with a lawyer, file a lawsuit against me, you'll collect the insurance money. Not only do they collect the primary policy, they also collect an umbrella policy. I'm doing this from memory. I think it was $4 million. He never records the settlement of that case. Alex Murdaugh, pockets it. I mean, it's so contemptible the way that he was stealing from people who most needed it and who had most suffered. But let me bring this full circle. And now in the Mallory Beach death, where he's being sued, Alex Murdaugh, the umbrella policy is no longer there to be tapped because the underwriter had canceled and no longer wanted to provide that coverage. Meaning, if they hadn't stolen from the Satterfield family, maybe there would have been that policy available to them and one less pressure brought to bear, which led him ultimately to murder his wife and his son. I need to tell you this. Yesterday, I was on the telephone with a friend of mine who's both a law professor and one of the foremost trial attorneys in the nation. His name is Shane Inspector. And I said to him, there's a book you must read. And I told him all about your book. And I described it as a continuing legal education course in and of itself. We're under an obligation, all attorneys are across the country, to be in a classroom and get ethical training. The ethical lapses that you document of Murdaugh are breathtaking. Say something about that.
They're completely breathtaking. And that whole sequence of events that you just described, the Satterfield, his housekeeper falling down the steps and him immediately, he follows the ambulance to the hospital. He's so trusted that they give him her purse to take back home for her. He's immediately thinking about how he can rob her.
Right.
And then he does. And then he loses. It's just an incredible sequence of events that you can hardly even imagine making up in fiction. And I think that's part of the reason why people were so captivated by it. But, it did, hoist him on his own petard because he could have settled with the Beach family if he'd had insurance. But there's another, even more, there's so many ethical lapses in there. He's an attorney. His law school roommate, Corey Fleming, is an attorney representing the boy's best interest, supposedly. He's also now in federal prison as a result of this theft. There was a judge who owed her job to the Murdaugh family. You couldn't become a judge in that area without their blessing. And she was the one that signed off on this secret settlement of the Satterfield. There's just so many.
But that doesn't. She said, "Hey, Alex, you're going to go down the hall now, and you're going to record this, right?" Like my friend, the trial attorney, said to me, "Well, wait a minute. How was it not of record?" I said, "You don't understand. The judge said go down the hall and file it, and he just kept on going. Where are the guns?"
That is one of the big questions. Where are the guns? Where's the money? And it was a question in many of there's still a lot of missing money that he stole from the most poor and vulnerable people in his community. But there are jurors who has said, she's known as the egg lady juror or the monkey farm juror, the juror who was disqualified on the last day, supposedly for talking about the case. She has said the guns were a big problem for her, that they never located them. So the answer is, we don't know, but a very strong working theory is that they are at a bottom of the swamp somewhere in Hampton County.
I mean, Valerie, you track his movements. The night it all happened, you would think that the property, even though you say it's twice the size of Central Park, you would think the guns would have been found. We obviously know that he changed his clothing. Is there clothing unaccounted for as well?
Well, and you remember you were talking about there is clothing that's unaccounted for, multiple garments. But you remember we're talking about the black box, and he makes this weird stop at the top of the driveway at his mother's house, and there's a ditch there. And he stops for a minute, and Creighton Waters, the prosecutor, really dug in on that. What were you doing for a minute? Well, I dropped my phone in the console. Did you? There is a theory that potentially he hid the guns either at he spent some time behind his parents' house in the man cave that was his father's. He also spent some time in the driveway near that culvert. Did he leave the guns there? Because there is a strong possibility, and prosecutors have said they would like to know if anybody helped him.
Well, what's your answer to that question?
That was such a sanitized scene. It was part of the reason, I talked with David Owen, the lead agent, at great length, and it was such a sanitized scene. It put law enforcement, way behind the eight ball trying to figure out what happened. It would have been very hard for one person to clean up that many things and disappear that many things very quickly.
The lawyering in this case.
I don't know if anybody will ever be charged, but I can tell you that
you have a suspicion that he had help. That's what I'm taking from you. You have a suspicion that he had help.
A very informed suspicion.
Okay. The lawyering, I thought, as a viewer, was great. Creighton Waters did a terrific job. I'm a fan of Dick Harpootlian. I thought Jim Griffin did a fine job as well. Having said that, did Griffin and Harpootlian blow it when they opened that door for the questioning of the financial crimes? I mean, you paint a picture of Harpootlian being on his phone and Griffin being in charge of that witness. What do you think?
Well, it's really tough. And I think I say this in the book, Alec's life of crime was just it was littered with landmines. And Dick and Jim, Dick Harpootlian and Jim Griffin had a difficult time not stepping on bomb after bomb. And what happened was Jim Griffin was questioning, it was a friend of Paul's, and asking him a very simple question. What was Maggie and Alec's relationship like? You grew up with them, you know them. Was it a loving relationship? Very simple question.
Can you think of any reason?
Can you think of any reason he would hurt her? And then anybody would do her harm. And then the judge says, well, that allows the prosecution to say, you can't think of any reason. Did you know about all of his money problems? Did you know he'd been stealing? And it just threw the door wide open to all of Alec's financials. So it just, in fairness, I think it was very hard for Jim in that moment to not, any question could set off a bomb.
And I thought the same thing, that if it hadn't been that, it would have come at a different moment, perhaps. I was sorry that Harpootlian...
And I think Dick and Jim have both told me this. In their mind, they felt certain that the judge had made up his mind ahead of time, that he was going to find
it. Yeah. I was disappointed that Harpootlian didn't close the case. I have just 90 seconds left with you. I must get to my one note of the book, and it's Becky Hill.
I'm very nervous about this.
It's Becky Hill. I wanted more about Becky Hill, again from a distance. I thought legitimate. The grounds for new trial on the basis that she'd overstepped her bounds, and I felt like you were dismissive of it at the end of the book. Give me 60 seconds on Becky Hill.
Well, Becky Hill has become such a fraught character in this whole drama. She's the clerk of court there in Colleton County. And she has been, she's resigned in scandal over plagiarizing part of her memoir. And then also potentially she's being investigated for potential jury tampering, telling the jurors, some of the jurors have said she encouraged them to think a certain way about Alec's testimony. I'm not dismissive of it at all. I think the appellate grounds that they filed recently, that Dick and Jim have filed recently, it's a strong argument that did he get a fair trial? And we'll see what the state Supreme Court will ask about that. But I think with Becky, there were just so many unknowns. And you've written books. I had to go with the facts as I knew them when we went to print.
I mean, you've got sworn testimony from at least one juror who says, she told me, watch him closely. I'm paraphrasing. Totally over the line if it happened. Did I lose you? I think I lost Valerie. Oh,
right at the critical moment.
I left her at the perfect position because we're out of time anyway.
And all you wanted to do was thank her very much.
Valerie, you're back. The book is tremendous. We lost you for a moment. The book is great. Congratulations. #1 New York Times bestseller. I predict you deserve it. It's that good. TC?
Bravo. Could not agree more.
It's phenomenal. It is phenomenal. Yes. Read this book, ladies and gentlemen. The Devil at His Elbow. And I've only scratched the surface. I had pages of questions that I wanted to ask.
I'll come back anytime.
Okay, I'm taking you up on that.